All right, so if you're joining us, we are going to start in just a couple of minutes. We just wanted to open the room early to give everybody time to get in. So we'll start about 1 minute after the hour. Welcome. If you are joining, let's see. I think I should be able to chat with, oh yeah. Oh, hi, Chris. Glad you're here. If you are with us, tell us who you are and what org you're with. We are so glad we have over 600 people registered for this webinar. So a lot of folks wanting to hear what these experts have to say, and really glad you're here. Oh, hi, Rebecca. Hello, Shelly. Hello, Jamie, Jennifer, Janine, Terry. Wow, it's moving fast. Wow, we have so many people from so many cool places. Hello to the UK. We have oh, this is so exciting. There's so many of you here all over the country. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started. Oh, hey, Kim. We're going to get started because we have so much to cover, and wow, now we have 3 Jacksons. We are going to probably go a few minutes over the hour. So if you can stay, please do. I imagine that we probably won't get through everything, but welcome. My name is Kristen Hassen, and I am the principal consultant at Outcomes for Pets Consulting. And we host these webinars just because we feel like there's not a lot of connectivity in the industry outside of conferences right now. And so we love bringing people together just to talk about the real problems facing animal shelters. And so this is just something we do for fun, and something because we really believe in the power of coming together and learning together. I am so honored. Oh, hey, Alexis. I'm so honored to be joined by friends and dear colleagues and people that really have been my mentors over the past several years. We're coming up on our 3-year anniversary. Outcomes is thank you. And Sarah and Cameron are a big part of why. Sarah, I think you made me take the leap and made me feel like that it was possible. So thank you. So we're here with Dr. Sara Pizano, who is really a longtime shelter consultant, has worked in the industry for, she'll tell us exactly how long, but also the author of really one of my go-to resources, the Best Practice Playbook for Animal Shelters. I love this thing. I reference it all the time. And so she can tell us a little more about where to get those. Welcome, Dr. Pizano. We're also here with
Thank you.
Cameron Moore, and Cameron has also been in so many shelters. I don't know if you know the number, Cameron, but Cameron has worked and is dearly loved by so many people in animal shelters. I have gotten to work with Cameron, and I have seen the kindness and compassion that she holds for people, but also her insistence that we do better by shelter animals, and really is the best person I know at balancing those things. And then, of course, we're also here with Jackson Galaxy, who is on the road joining us and having a few, going to be on screen momentarily. And Jackson needs no introduction, but also the author of 4 books. My favorite one, if you haven't read it, Total Cat Mojo, which tells you so much that is relevant really to your cat, but also to shelter cats. So welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. Okay, so the way this is gonna go is we're just gonna get started. We're gonna dive in with questions. This webinar is conversational, so if you are not watching, that's okay. You can listen to, but we're just gonna be discussing the issues that we have seen in shelters all over the country for the last several decades. I think all of us have worked in the field for several decades. And we have seen a lot of different shelters, and we've also seen problems that repeat over and over and over again. And so if you're coming, whether you're a shelter who feels like you are at the very bottom and you're just struggling with the basics, or you feel like you've gotten pretty far, but there's still some outstanding issues, this should be really relevant for you. Everything we talk about today, we will send you, we'll send out in some form. So for referencing things, we'll send you those things. And all this information will be available. This webinar will be recorded, and if people registered, you'll be able to watch it later, and you can share the link. So let's get started. I want to start with Dr. Pizano, who has, as I travel around the country consulting, I hear a lot about Dr. Pizano's work to change ordinances, look at regulations, high-level policies. And what I hear is like, oh, there's no one better at making sure like those things, those barriers are tackled, and why that's so important. So Dr. Pizano, I was hoping you could just start by talking a little bit about why that approach versus going in only to the shelter and focusing on operations.
Sure. And thanks for the 6 hours that I have to speak about this today, Kristen. But I will try to keep it tight. 38 years I've been in animal welfare. And early on, I was director of a large municipal shelter, and no one had looked at the ordinances in 30 years. And it was handcuffing the operation. And I thought, well, that's kind of crazy. And I was a veterinarian at the time, but it's kind of intimidating to think about, wait, I'm going to talk to a mayor or a commissioner. Like, that's so scary. I could never do that. Guess what? I just found out, number one, they're normal people. And number two, they just want information. And they're like, yeah, tell us. And they were welcoming, right? So I learned a lot through that process. And that's why when we started doing consults back in 2013, I always looked at that, because shelters would say, oh, we can't do that because of our ordinance. Wah, wah, wah. Like, period, end of story. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to need to talk to somebody. And it's been a lot easier. So thank you, Kristen, for showing the playbook. And that's why in the playbook, there's a chart that says, hey, here's what you should have in your ordinances, and here's why. And here's what you should not have in your ordinance. And mostly it's thinking about, everyone has the best intentions, but with policy, so many of the times they are not leading us to our goals. So if you have time or can get a hold of the playbook, I think that chapter will be very helpful.
What are some of the common ordinance barriers that you're seeing? Like, what do you still see that hold shelters back?
Still see stray holds for cats. Everyone on this webinar knows cats are smarter than people and they don't get lost. There is less than a 2% return to owner rate. So there should be no stray hold for cats. We shouldn't be bringing them in unless they're sick or injured, etc. Spay neuter them, keep them where they're already cared for. So stray holds for cats, pet limits. You guys, this is what people think. Oh, we had this hoarding case. So if we have pet limits, we're going to prevent the hoarding case. Doesn't correlate, right? We all know that, but responsible pet ownership doesn't correlate to pet limits. Maybe high adoption fees are in there, maybe adoption requirements. So the director and team don't even have an opportunity to do open adoptions because they're handcuffed. High adoption fees and hoops to get your pet back, a return to owner that might be financially out of reach. So there's definitely consistent things that I see in with people who just had the best of intentions. But everybody should know your state law and your ordinance, because I have met a lot of municipal attorneys that didn't know either, and we had to correct them.
Right, like the barriers weren't as big. I think oftentimes you see them kind of overly conservatively imagining what the rule says, and it doesn't say that. And then they look at it and they're like, oh, I guess we don't have to do this, right?
That's exactly right.
So if there is, and especially when it comes to animal control policies, if there are things like that that you're hearing like, oh, our ordinance says we have to, you got to dig into that, right? And anyone can do it. I think that's the thing I missed is like normal people can look at these things, like people that aren't legal experts or aren't government officials, and work to overcome them. If you have overcome an ordinance
Exactly.
or you have challenges, yeah, it looks like a lot of people are talking about required stray holds. And state laws can be overturned too. I mean, I think that that's not an impossible thing. So
State laws can be, yes, but it's very difficult and hard. We concentrate on the local ordinances and figure out how we could operate within the law and abide by the state statute. So, for example, if there is a state, very rare to see a stray hold for cats in a state statute, but they are out there. So, how do we manage that if we're taking them in the shelter? Guess what? Don't take them into the shelter. If they're healthy and adult, they go through a spay neuter program so they don't come into your system. So there's lots of ways to make sure you're operating legally for sure.
yeah, and
I
I
think knowing your data too is very helpful, especially when you're trying to convince a commissioner or a county manager, city manager, why the change is needed. Because again, they're doing this with best of intention, but without the facts. And once they hear that, hey, less than 2% of cats get reclaimed by owners, or the majority of dogs get reclaimed within 3 days, why would you have an extended stray hold period?
right. Yeah, so for some of you this is maybe challenging, but there are workarounds, and I think we'll probably not get too much into that today because we have so much ground to cover, but foster is a great way to get around mandatory hold periods because you can send animals out as fosters until those time periods have ended. So let's talk about what I want to hear from each of you about things that you see repeatedly, because everywhere I go, the shelter will share the issues. I'll see the data. It looks similar to other shelters. And then they will articulate why they're unique, different, and can't change that thing. And it's frustrating when I hear that because I think there's these repeating things. So I want to hear from each of you just about some of the common, like basic issues that you're seeing in most systems.
Cameron, go ahead.
Sure. I think one thing is a lot of shelters, especially if you're municipal or have municipal contracts, you feel like you have no control over anything, that you have to take in everything that's brought to you, even when you know you don't have space or staffing or the ability to properly care for them. So I feel like people have a concern over triaging and managing their intake. Managing does not mean leaving sick and injured animals out on the street. It doesn't mean leaving dangerous, aggressive dogs in the community, but there are ways to help your community help pets without physically taking them into your building. So that's one thing.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and I think what was shocking for us in the beginning doing consults is we thought we would have to have a new plan for every community. And what we learned over and over is it didn't, and I use these examples all the time because they're so stark to me. We sat with the mayor in Dallas, Texas, and we sat with the mayor in McCurry County, Kentucky, population 15,000, and there was not one word different in those conversations. Then we went to Texas, then we went to Florida, then we went to Georgia. It was all the same concerns, all the same. So I feel now looking back, holy cow, I wish I knew all this stuff when I was director because these are solvable and we know it's July 30th and so many of you are drowning because you have so many animals in your shelter, in your system, and we just want to encourage you that there is a better way. We have to make sure we're exhausting all those options. And all of us on this call have the most amazing stories about safety net and helping people keep or place their pets or fostering strays. And for us, I know when we told shelters like, yeah, it'll be great if you help 30%. And for them to call us and year over year, 4 years in a row, we help 80% so they don't come in the shelter. We were humbled by that, you guys. Like, so it really is fascinating. And you should take that and say, oh, thank goodness we're all sharing the same problems because now we know these solutions work. These aren't like, hey, try this somewhere and see if it works. So I think you're all special. You all care about animals and very down to the details, you might have differences, like we live in a beach community, this commissioner doesn't like pets, whatever. But the overall animal welfare challenges that we all face are exactly the same. And that should give you hope and inspire you to say, you know what, maybe I need to like release a little bit of fear and judgment and bias that we all have. I know I was a card carrying member, always have to take a step back and say, wait a minute, like, I know something happened in 1975 that was really bad, but we have this very big policy. And that was the last time it happened. So maybe we should release that fear. And fear, judgment are the enemies of us helping as many animals as possible.
I love that. And I just want to add to that, I think it was Finn Dowling said, we were speaking to a group and she said, if you are telling a story as a reason that you are not willing to do something now, that's your trauma speaking. And I think it's so important, like, we have a lot of fear because of traumas we've experienced, but it's like, that does not make for good policy moving forward. And I think that's one of the takeaways. I think people, really, really everywhere we go, there is some traumatic event that has caused everything in the organization to shift. Like a system change results from one or more traumas. And that system change is incredibly harmful to animals over lots of time. And like, if that is you, and that describes why you're getting a no, that's something to really dig into. Hi, Jackson, you're here. We cannot hear you.
Hi,
Hi.
everybody. Sorry, real life here. I'm just sitting outside of a vet office with my dog, not my
Aw.
cat, my dog. Sorry for the bad reception if there is any, but a great conversation. Hey, I would love to. I just wanted to follow up just really quickly on the trauma informed policy, because in terms of what I've seen over the past couple of years, just going to a lot of different shelters, where it comes to cats, there seems to be a lot of that. That's pretty epidemic, where there are hoops to jump through in order to adopt a cat in a lot of the shelters that I've been at, that on their face don't really make sense until you ask why it's there in the first place, and then you make your way back to somebody who was supervising at some point, had a trauma with the cat, and then suddenly we have problems again. I think we've created a lot of barriers when it comes to adopting cats, but I wanted to make sure I said that. But overall, I think one of the things I wanted to chime in about was, and I think everybody would expect this of me, to say cats are coming in second, but cats are coming in second, and especially in shelters that, when cats are being sheltered with dogs, cats come in second, and that includes just resources, and also just when it comes to sort of using imagination when it comes to programming, thinking about how we can market cats. And I guess the only thing I would say is that, if because I do wind up getting a lot of pushback on that when I mention it, think about what you put into dogs and just do the same thing for cats. That includes um, enrichment for sure, environmental and otherwise. More protocol when it comes to volunteers, and the biggest thing I think is the use of foster. I don't Cats shouldn't be coming into the shelter unless they really, really have to. From a pathway perspective, it it feels like we really do have to start thinking about how we serve the cats better and their future adopters by adopting them out of foster care. I think it's a big deal. And
Yeah, I think that we see so many cats that are like tagged as behavior and put in the back room somewhere. I mean, that first of all, I think we were talking before the webinar about why are those cats even coming in the first place, if they're healthy and don't need to be there, but they get put in these back rooms and held indefinitely, like in a prison setting, and it's really unjust.
And I think that we have to admit as a community that trying to figure out who is quote feral or friendly, who is unsocialized, who is just frozen, and trying to figure that out while they're sitting in the shelter is not reliable. It's not something that we can do reliably unless they're this rock star cat who just doesn't, they're like, hey, let's have a party. But otherwise, it's impossible. And to your point about them sitting in the back there somewhere, and have an unsocialized cat back there, which is harmful to them, and again, I think a lot of that is solved by having cats evaluated, pathwayed, and adopted out of foster.
Thank you. Let's talk about like a little bit about so from a system perspective, I want to talk about intake, because every time you say managed intake, I get accused a lot. And I hear this, you want everyone to throw dogs out on the street and leave animals to suffer. Like it always saddens me when I hear that, because like I think that it's unethical to leave an animal in need on the street. Like I know in my own community in Austin, when I was there, they were telling people just to put dogs back, leave them there, go take them back. Like I would never advocate for that. Yet I believe in managed intake, because if we don't manage intake, we have no chance of really actually helping animals. So I wanted to get all of your take about where do you think like where do you see the change needing to happen? Like what actually needs to happen at intake? We know the problem, but what needs to happen?
I'll
I
go
think
jump in
oh,
this.
go ahead, Cameron. Go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say, I feel like shelters feel like they're the only ones who have the solutions, right? Or they're the only ones who can take on the problem. And I think we need to be empowering our citizens. That's all of us, whether we're just a normal citizen in the community or a volunteer or a shelter worker, but we need to empower ourselves to solve the problems without relying on the shelter, right? So when I find a dog in my neighborhood who runs up on my porch, I don't immediately call animal control. I don't take them to my shelter. I have learned like I need to get on next door because all my nosy neighbors know where this dog lives, and take its picture and post it on Petco Lovelost and do all the things. And there's like 10 steps that I can do before I even go to the shelter. So I feel like we need to trust our community, which again, we have a hard time in general believing that people are good and they're going to do the right thing, and empowering them to be a part of the solution. And I do think at the beginning of COVID, at the pandemic, we were forced to do that. And we saw a lot of success. Like people in the community were reuniting dogs at a much greater rate than they were in the shelter. That says a lot. So I think that's a key thing. Go ahead, Dr. Pizano.
Well, I just wanted to back up, and in the last several years, I've really had some aha moments when I look at these national stats. You guys, we've all for decades been sprinting on this treadmill to nowhere, and we're exhausted and we just can't. I remember as public shelter director in 2005, like tears streaming down my face. I cannot imagine getting out of this hole. Like I didn't see it. Now I feel like we see it and it's doable. And what we need to keep in mind is there is 189 million pets in the United States. That's dogs and cats. 189 million. Every year, people want 8 million more pets in their homes. So 8 million adoptions. How many animals went into shelters in 2024? 6 million. 6 million. We can't even keep up, but here we are, like we have this horrible overpopulation crisis. We have all these stray animals. You don't think out of those 189 million animals, there's more than 3 million dogs running around or 2 million dogs? Of course there are. So the norm is that they're going home on their own, or their owners are finding them, or their neighbors are putting them in their backyard, but they're in their neighborhoods. We now have that research. So when we talk about this this whole big question of intake, like Cameron said, why do we feel like, oh, we got to round up all the animals and confine them? It's not practical, it's not doable, nor should we. The shelter should be animals with no other options. And the number one are sick, injured, and dangerous. And we've been accused of the same thing, Kristen. Like Dr. Pisano said, don't take animals in that need it. When did Dr. Pisano ever say that, right? So, but we have to keep this in perspective because it helps us release that fear and judgment, right? Like, oh, we better take that dog in. Guess what? That dog nationally has a 22% chance of being reunited with its family. And I think that's pathetic. So, talking about intake, if we take that pet in, we better do everything from the point that pet enters that building. That means posting them immediately. I can't tell you how many shelters Cameron and I have been at. Well, we don't post until the stray hold is over because we want, we want to make sure the wrong person doesn't. What? No, it's 2025. They're posted. We have our ACOs, or we stay in the neighborhood. We put up signs. We put the yard signs. There is no way we should be talking to neighbors. Can you foster this dog and find it? Because 9 out of 10 times they're going to find the owner within a couple hours. So when we talk about intake, I think it's really important to keep these numbers in perspective, in that we have painted ourselves like we're the adoption police, the intake police, the enforcement police, and we're not. So we need to release all of that. Part of it is control. Again, I'm a card carrying member of the Control Freak Society, as I know a lot of us are, but we have to look at this practically, because so many of our shelters are overcrowded because we're not paying attention to intake. And then we're overwhelmed with the numbers. And to Jackson's point, now they're not getting the best care in the shelter. And we don't have time to pathway plan because we're too busy just trying to clean and feed them, right?
So from a really practical perspective, I see some of your comments in the chat. One is that if you're not using Petco Love Blast, we just recommend pushing everybody through Petco Love Blast. They now have a map with little pictures of the animals that makes it so much easier to get pets home. But we really recommend you ask people if they want to hold the animal. Like, just start doing that. 20 to 25% will say yes based on shelters that have tracked their data. It's higher for cats. Just inviting people to hold the animals, you're going to automatically get a fourth of your population not coming in as stray. So that's number one. Number two, if they do come in, making them available for pre-adoption. For those of you that have 7-day stray holds or longer, this is critical. Even for 3-day, if you make them available for pre-adoption, like Dr. Pisano said, it's 22% of dogs are getting reclaimed, something like 2% of cats are getting reclaimed. Let people adopt them while they're on the stray hold so they can get altered and out of there the next day. We're not doing this in most shelters still, and it's a shame because a lot of those animals would leave so much faster. But one of the issues I see, and this is something you all can change right away, is if you're holding them after, like, shelters are holding them as unavailable, and then they're keeping them unavailable until someone has time to assess them, evaluate them, medically get them ready, and then they become available. And that is a tragedy. You do not need to do that. It should be available from day one that they come in. This is a big one, like a big one, making them available right away to the public. You will move them so much more quickly through the system. And that idea that somebody has to kind of sign off to make them available it's totally unnecessary, and they spend weeks in addition. We did a study in one big shelter, and found that on average, the animals were unavailable or in some unavailable status for 80% of the time they were there. 80% of the time they couldn't be adopted. Like, that is a shelter that was euthanizing for space. So those are really simple things. Jackson, it looks like you're waiting to say something.
Oh, no. I'm just amening in my head everything that you guys are saying. I do want to touch also on, for lack of a better word, marketing. I think that from a cat perspective, we're and especially right now, everyone is struggling because we're in the middle of kitten season, and there becomes that backlog that happens. But there's that stat from the APPA from last year that showed that our biggest rise in cat guardians is Gen Z males, and I think it was a 24% rise year on year. That's pretty huge, and that's something where when we're thinking about how we market our cats, how we get them out of there, we're missing, I think, some really juicy places to lean in. And I think again, it reflects a lack of knowledge of who the cats are when we're not able to take good pictures of them. We're not getting good pictures, and we're not putting their personality out there in the same way that we would do for dogs, because the dogs make it so much more available to us. But I think going and I know that we come down to the, hey, we're slammed right now. It's the middle of kitten season, and you're saying take better pictures. Yeah, at the same time, yeah, because some of the cats who are harder to adopt in the first place are going to stick around longer because kittens, and getting personality out there is the way to speak, I think, to that new demographic that just wasn't there before. I mean, that's a really big deal. So
We're gonna come back to marketing. Actually, it's a really important topic. I want to go to the chat because folks are talking about the lack of spay neuter appointments, and this is a
Yeah.
huge. And Dr. Pizano, Cameron, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're recommending?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this started at, the beginning of the pandemic when we didn't have capacity and what have you. And here's the thing, I want everybody to remember, we have the best of intentions. It took us decades to convince the public to spay neuter. I promise you, people, we are a country that spay neuters. We are a country that people want their pets spayed and neutered. And the ones that aren't and are producing litters are typically the ones that don't have access financially. And so we have to remember that as, again, we're looking at this broken system of confinement that we've created so many years ago, 100 years ago. And so when animals come in, again, they should flow out. And if that means I have a capacity issue with spay neuter, I don't have a slot for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Plan A is not to keep them in the shelter or within a separate foster. It is foster to adopt. So now you could be in foster status. I just quickly saw something about a state law. There are some state laws. Most state laws say they have to be spayed and neutered within 30 days. But if you don't have capacity and if it's 45 days, I promise you, like, you will not get closed down. You want to get spay neuter done as quickly as possible, but so many shelters are struggling with that. You need to let them go. And this is the kicker. Now I have a system by which I'm making the appointment ahead of time, and I have like automatic text reminders and click here if you have to reschedule, because Cameron and I go to shelters like, oh, we tried that, it didn't work. Guess what? There was no system. There was no follow-up. And then if people didn't come back, no one ever found, and then they called it a failure. So remember, people do want to spay neuter. People ask us, well, how do we increase capacity? How do we find a full-time vet? Well, guess what? It's a puzzle. It's throw spaghetti at the wall. There's all kinds of remote programs and mobile programs. There's per diem surgeons. We can't rely on one full-time or multiple full-time surgeons anymore because there's just not enough people who want to do that. So it's a combination of all of the above and municipalities and nonprofits partnering. But I also want to say what we see is no kitten season or minimal kitten seasons when you're doing targeted spay neuter right. So keep that in mind. If you have kittens coming out of and puppies coming out of your ears, you need to look at what's happening in your community and really focus on targeted spay neuter because your numbers we know will go down.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think this is one that is hard for some shelters to do for various reasons. And while it's hard, if you're not facing a state law barrier, it is worth putting the time into making it happen. Like it is worth it. And we know, I see people talking about in the chat, one saying we've had a 99 success rate, only had to take back 2 dogs that didn't show up for multiple vet appointments. People are not showing up. In fact, I think the bigger problem is they're getting upset they can't actually get an appointment sooner. And so I think that we understand some of the wait times on spay neuter right now, especially, are really long. But we all keep going to shelters where people are holding animals that say adopted. And it's so sad to see adopted sitting there in a cage getting sick,
For weeks.
sometimes getting euthanized. Like this is something that ethically we should be focused on.
Right. And again, this, I want to remind everybody, goes back to fear and judgment. We're not going to release this pet intact because we're afraid that this person is not going to be responsible and bring them back. So again, if one of them goes out and gets pregnant, guess what? I'm okay with that in lieu of they otherwise would have stayed in the shelter for 4 more weeks or 6 more weeks. So it's not the end of the world if, of course, I want everybody spayed and neutered before they leave the shelter. Of course, who doesn't, right? But guess what? A lot of us don't have those options now. So we have to go to plan B.
You guys, I'm wondering, I mean, I think what I see is like there are some people that have this like moral reason for this stuff, but there's almost a bigger group now who just are like, it's unmanageable. Like it's unmanageable to have all these animals out in foster, and like our vets don't want to do it, and like it's more staffing barriers. Like it's maybe not all just sort of emotions. And I think for those shelters, there is a real question of how you're investing your staff. Like, and Cameron, I think you see this a lot where if you only have one staff person for all these animals in foster, or none, like some do, that's a huge problem. And I wonder if you think like we need to rethink how we're allocating actually people to serve more animals that are in custody but not in the shelter.
Oh, for sure. And I think everyone should be looking at what roles are people playing in the shelter? Because a lot of times we go to the shelter and true, they probably don't have enough staff, but there's like one person who's doing 10 people's jobs and other people who are doing very few jobs. So we have to make sure that we're balancing the roles and that we do have systems in place that help set us up for success. Because remember, if we don't manage that, animals are still coming into our shelter. So what are we doing? Like if they stay and we don't let them leave, then they get sick. And now our staff who's overworked is now medicating, or if they're not medicating, then they're euthanizing. So we put ourselves in a pickle. So we just have to look at what's available to us. How can we be creative, and how can we share that workload?
And how can we capitalize on technology? Because we're still going to shelters that are calling individual fosters. Can you foster? Can you foster? Right? And that is a time suck. So leaning into technology is a must if you're going to try to manage your workload. You can't do this anymore with sticky notes. And people say to us, we can't do that because we don't have enough staff. And we say, that's why you have to do this, because you don't have enough staff. So think about how you can leverage all this amazing technology that's at our fingertips now.
When all of us are working consultants, and this is the kind of thing we help with. And there are other folks too in the industry. We all work really collaboratively. I think it's cool being a consultant because there is so much work. We all get to just like be like, no, you should work with that person. They know this the best. But that is where we come in and help. And I think that's some of the shelters want to do this stuff, but they don't have the expertise or resources. So, Jackson, you look like you're wanting to say something.
I keep having that look, huh? No,
I keep seeing you be like,
oh no, it's always like yes. You guys you're hitting it all, and I'm looking at the chat as well. No, I'm right there. There wasn't anything in that one moment. I'll just go off on something totally different. So I'll wait.
Well, in the meantime, going to conferences is also really good. If you can put that in your budget, apply for scholarships to go, because that's where we see a lot of these new programs and technology. For example, like if you've ever heard of Petzl, they're doing the post-adoption follow-ups, which again takes that workload off your staff. And if you're concerned about, are we having returns, or we don't have time to follow up with people, but we're going to judge them if something fails, this is where we can use free technology to help us touch base with those adopters and often, help keep the pets in the home. And then learn more about, that pet owner's experience, which then they're happy, then they come back and adopt from us again. So there's a lot of cool stuff out there that we're always learning about.
So if anybody feels like they're doing a great job with foster to adopt, if you don't mind sharing your contact info in the chat, others may want to reach out to you. I want to move on to animals living in the shelter. I was in another life, I was a horse trainer, and I spent my life in barns where we just provided care every day. Like, we focused on care and enrichment. And it's been striking to me to go to shelters, especially those that are a little less overburdened and would be able to do more. And they're almost acting like horse boarding stables. Like, they've got a lot invested in enrichment for dogs, not always cats, Jackson, to your point. They have a lot invested in them getting 3 walks a day, but almost nothing invested in them getting out of the place. And I think that, like, if I could make one magic wand change, it would be that everybody thinks about movement every day and stops thinking so much about the animals in the shelter and starts thinking about how to get them out. Like, we don't need to think about how to make them live better in the shelter.
Right.
And I think that might even be a controversial thing to say, because I don't
No,
need
I agree.
giving care, but it's like, why are we investing so much in them living there for months to sometimes years?
I agree. And I was at a shelter recently and somebody said, well, how are we supposed to get these dogs adopted who nobody wants? And I said, well, I think that's the problem number one. You're labeling them. These were not aggressive dogs, maybe they were mouthy, jumpy, lots of energy, but they had already labeled them somebody that, a dog that can't get adopted. So you can't start from there. I mean, you have to be in a position where you're advocating for the best placement for them no matter what. I personally advocate, if it is a dangerous dog, I do advocate for euthanasia. And I know that's a very controversial, opinion, but there are some dogs I believe should not be adopted. But so I'm not talking about those, but even to Kristen's point about them living in the shelter, is that really a good quality of life? And if I'm a shelter, small, medium, or large, how many animals do I want to save? Do I want to save just that one that could live in that kennel for a year? Or would I love to help 10 in that kennel? And once a month at least or 52, once a week, I find them a home. And again, when you look at why they're not getting adopted, we again go to shelters that are like, we're doing everything we can. And what we see from the outside looking in is barrier, 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 barrier. And sometimes we say, like, I'm wondering if you could make it any harder, because I can't think of any way. Like, we really need to, again, release that judgment and fear and walk into our shelters and think, how do I want this to go? And Kristen, I think you did that, called some breeders and to see how quickly you could get a pet, right? Like, I want people to walk in the shelter and be like, oh, welcome to the Park Plaza Hotel. How can I help you? And we're going to make the right match today. Whether maybe we
Yeah.
have somebody in the shelter, maybe we don't. If it's not today, we're going to help you. And I think that we're missing that piece. And if you really look at what your barrier is, here's a perfect one. We just saw this on an adoption application the other day. Landlord name and number. So that means you're going to call my landlord and check. Why? Because I'm afraid and I'm judging you that you're not going to be able to adopt a pet. So I have a fear, right? This is all about fear and judgment. So I just ask everybody, like Cameron and I, again, we have evolved. We were doing all these things way back when. So I feel like we're like in recovery, right? The judgment team in recovery, talking about how to look at these things from an unbiased lens, because woof, adopters welcome for me by Humane World, what was used to be Humane Society of the United States. I hope everyone has read it. It literally changed my approach to adoptions in 2015. So hopefully everyone's read it. If you haven't, go on Humane World right now and read the PDF, because it's, to me, such a valuable asset for us.
We're going to share all of these in the chat. And I want to just go back to a couple of things that I'm seeing comments in the chat. When we talk about the focus on enrichment, I think one of the things that we see fairly commonly is shelters will have staff dedicated to enrichment and walking and no staff dedicated to adoptions. And so they're investing more in care than outcomes. Of course, we want animals to have basic enrichment provided by volunteers. Like, volunteers should be doing that work. They love to do that work. We should have, nylobones in every kennel and cat toys in kennels and scratch pads, like all of that stuff should exist. But we really do need to look at where are we putting the resources in shelters. And what I see over and over again is there is a overinvestment in intake and care. So more staff dedicated to intake and care than outcomes. And it'll be like 30, 30, and then 15. And like, that's simple math. If you have a factory bringing in items and then packing the items, but you don't have anyone to get them out, you're going to have them stacking up in that factory. And when we look at it that way, the one thing you can do right now is look at your work chart. We just did this for a big shelter and we were able to get them 40 additional staff positions because the imbalance was so profound that the leadership of the government looked at it and said, oh my gosh, there's no way we can continue this way. And they didn't take away, they actually added. So looking at your org chart now, it's easy to do that math and say, oh my gosh, only 10% of our entire staff is dedicated to outcomes. That's why we aren't getting animals out of here.
I wanted to quickly chime in, going back to what Dr. Pizano was talking about, because I think it is something, and I'm right there too. I mean, when I started in my shelter job, yeah, I mean, I look back on that and how long this list was, including the landlords, including just background checks, including like checking to see if they're not lying about how much money they make. And I mean, it's embarrassing now, of course, in retrospect. But the one thing I can tell you, and this is after going to 18 different shelters over the past 18 months, is we would have this, this real sort of, okay, let's drop everything and talk about our fear and judgment. And nobody wants to admit it. And I think that we're all saying that we've done this in spades over the years. You get to that point where that the deeper the conversation goes, at the bottom of it is everybody lies. And that's our trauma collectively as a community. Everybody lies. That's what winds up us having padlocks on our kennels, and because we think that our community is going to steal our animals out of the shelter, which I mean, and that's just an accumulation of trauma over the years. And I think this is a wonderful time to just have that moment where you just make sure you're cleaning the decks a little bit in terms of that fear and judgment, because that and that applies, by the way, to foster parents as well. I'm seeing foster trainings that are exhaustive. Just to become a foster parent takes you weeks or a month, and that should be happening right away. Like, what I was saying before about cats, you don't need to be a behavior foster. You don't have to be a cat foster. You could be learning about cats and be a foster parent, I think, and lean on us for that information about who that cat is and what we're looking for and what we need. And you'll, I think, find more enthusiastic people who don't have to wait,
Yeah, for sure. And I love the training that I'm sure so many of you have seen. Everybody stand up. And if this, then sit down. And I was the first to sit down in a large group one time,
Like, if your animal isn't vaccinated, if your animals at home aren't vaccinated, sit down. If you, right.
Did you ever sneak a pet into your apartment? Yes, I did. And Cameron always says, like, look at your adoption process and see how many of your staff who you love and trust and know are devoted animal lovers, how many, but I want to give us grace, okay? Because we witness trauma. We're in it. Our ACOs are bringing in sick and injured and neglected and cruelty cases. And so I think what's happened is it's been so hard for us to go from the back door where those animals are coming in to the front door and welcome, come on in. I'm going to totally trust you, because we have such fear that that's going to happen to them again. And I just, when the mega adoption started in Jacksonville, it changed everything for those shelters, because they were like, soccer moms are coming to adopt. And, Cameron was really judgmental and she didn't adopt out a lot of cats. And when she released that, just her and her friend, who are volunteers with no shelter, adopted 1,200 cats a couple of years ago. So, and with no shelter, just one cage in 11 pet supermarket stores. But it really it's hard for us. So I think it's good to talk about that, because we have to give ourselves grace and be like, okay, I get that that was traumatic, but this is somebody intentionally coming to my shelter to adopt with their family, maybe by themselves, maybe with a partner, but maybe, just maybe, they are not. And I'm sure all of us have seen those adoption applications. Number one question: have you ever been convicted or accused of animal cruelty? So that's how we're treating people that are coming in the front door. So just to keep that in mind. And Cameron has such a great testimonial. Do you want to add anything to that,
I
Cameron?
was just thinking recently, I don't know if you guys saw everything that went around social media with the young boy who went to adopt and he dressed up in a suit because this was like the happiest day of his life. And I just
Aw.
thought, how, like, we forget because we're busy, right? We're cleaning kennels, our boss is on our back trying to get stuff done. And then somebody walks in the door and we're like, ugh, are you here to waste my time? Are you kicking the cans? Do you just want to be in a petting zoo? But really, these people are like, we've saved up our allowance. My mom finally said yes. And like, here was this little boy in a suit who was just thrilled to adopt. So I feel like sometimes we need to like check ourselves. And I was the same way, you guys. I was at a pet store every weekend with my tent and tables and cages. And people would walk up and I would just cross my arms and be like, do you want to take on this one? And I'd find reasons to turn people down. And it's embarrassing, you guys. But that's how I learned from my mentors, right? And but I feel like we all have kind of been through that same. There must be some underground book of how to judge other people out of
Yeah.
adoption. But once we let that go and we realize like, hey, even if we have a return these days, that's okay. Now we know more about the pet. Now we can do maybe match them up more easily the next time, right? But a lot of times when these returns happen, they're not because the pet did anything wrong, right? And so it's no harm, no foul. Yeah.
Can I just throw in a statistic that 50% of humans who get married, including me, get divorced? And so, why do we have people walk into a shelter and, have to make that lifelong commitment? Imagine maybe we would have a better, divorce rate if we did that with like, speed dating, but we're asking people to come in 15, 20 minutes an hour and make a lifelong commitment. And God help you if you return that pet, like Cameron is saying. And so we want to say, oh, no problem. Okay. Like, let's see what what didn't fit about this pet. And let's help you find a different pet, because we don't see returns as a major issue if they happen. And guess what? Nationally, it's only like 11%, which I
No
think
matter
is
what you do,
pretty
no matter
phenomenal.
what you do, like it's always
Yeah,
going to be consistent. You're not going to change that number. Unless you use something like Petzl and can get to people's problems, but you're not, we hear this all the time, like, well, look at all the adoption returns. They don't change whether you do open adoption
right,
or not.
right. And
But
if
also,
I could lastly just share some really good advice I saw in a dish towel, true story. And it said, don't worry. You never had control. All you had was anxiety.
Yeah.
And
Did you
So
say that was on a
if
dish towel?
if that's not adoptions, I don't know what is.
what about like, okay, So for those of you looking for a way to actually operationalize what we're saying right now, because that's what we really want to give you, what I want to share is that first thing you should do is go through your website and your documents, like your adoption questionnaire, your foster questionnaire. Go look at those, because what's happening is high staff turnover means that there are new people coming in all the time. And if we're not repeating this messaging and this bias training, it doesn't matter if we believe it. Like we may be sitting here and be like, yeah, we get it. It doesn't matter, because what's going to happen because of the system is that people come in, they develop a bias, and all of a sudden they've got 3 new questions in your adoption form, or they've got a new training you have to attend before you can volunteer, and you don't even know it's happened. So one easy thing to do when you leave here is just go through your website. It's great use of AI. Just plug in your website language and say, show me all the barriers or the things that aren't very welcoming to people, and you will be shocked. Like, you will almost like 100% of the time, I find things in websites the director had no idea were there. And same goes for your social media platforms. If you aren't, we hear all the time there's no fosters, and we'll go to people's social platforms and we'll see that they've mentioned foster twice in the last 3 months. Try a third of your total social posts. So I think that what you think is true is probably not true when it comes to what you're asking the public for and how easy you're making it for them to help.
And just by the way, to piggyback on the whole returns thing, also take a look at your intake. It's that's one thing that we were looking at, and those intakes are also onerous. And to the point that's been made a couple of times right now, the return ideally gets us to know that animal better when they come back in. So just getting that lack of judgment when someone's walking in, and just lowering that threshold in terms of what the questions are that you're asking. I was actually at a shelter in a rural area, and we would show them different intake questionnaires, and one was just like a stock, animal control. I just picked up this dog or cat on the street, and it was just surrendered over. And they got to we asked what in this community would be a barrier to this person following through and surrendering this animal. And they said, well, you asked for a social security number. There's no one in this community. That's a stop here. I'd walk out the door if you asked me for. So those are the kind of things. Like, when you're taking a good look, take a good look.
Yeah, it's a really good point. We have a couple of people in the chat are like mentioning like, well, what about this? And what about when I see this thing happen where people adopt an animal and then they return it many, many times. And I think like, so we're seeing folks in the chat, and thank you for sharing, because I think it's important people are honest, but this problem of, well, I see this happen. What do you recommend when people are seeing sort of a trend that they think is happening? Like, should they be tracking the data on that? How should they be approaching that problem?
Yeah, I mean, we see this.
Data.
Go ahead, Cameron.
I was about to say data is everything, because to be honest with you, I think people see, say you have an event, you have 100 adoptions, you did a fee waived adoption, you did 100 adoptions, you had 2 returns. We hear all the time that was a failure. You guys, that was a 98% success rate, right? So yes, some returns are going to happen, but I bet you when you actually track your numbers and you see that your percentage is really, really low, it's not that bad. And guess what? If I had somebody that was a repeat return person, maybe I'd talk to them about fostering, because maybe short-term commitments is what they're into. And again, like, for all of you doing field trips and slumber parties and sleepovers and stuff like that, you guys, that is what's helping increase adoptions, because again, it's like speed dating for pets. We're asking people to like judge based on a picture or your interaction in a play yard. This way you get to live with them for a couple of days, and that's really amplifying the adoption. So allowing people to do that. But data is everything, you guys, because without it, we're guessing and we're assuming, and a lot of times we're wrong. And I've been wrong too. Yeah.
In our experience, when people tell us a guesstimate and then we have them look at the data, they don't match at all. But to piggyback, before I know some people have to get off now, looking at your website, like Cameron said, or like Kristen said, and looking at your adoption application, and this is what you need to think about. What's my goal? And are my goals reflected? Because in animal welfare, our goals are over here, and we're often going this way. We're zagging instead of zigging. So when you say like, yes, we want to help people keep their pets. But when I look at the website, that's like page 9, that's click 9. So what are my goals? And is everything that is our out-facing external and internal messaging in line with our goals? Because
Yes.
because the problem is so often it's not. That's something really important to keep in mind.
That's really important. Like, I think that the way we're talking to the public and what we're doing, like, if you are a leader in one of these orgs, spending an hour out of volunteer orientation, spending an hour up front at your adoption counter and just seeing what's happening, looking at very basic data like your conversion rate of how many people came to the volunteer orientation, but how many people started volunteering. We'll see it's like 30 people wanted to volunteer, and then we end up with one of them actually volunteering. Like, that kind of data, it's not something we typically track as organizations, but it's so important because when we hear I can't get enough fosters, that is almost always because you are not asking enough and you're putting too many barriers in place. As soon as you start asking enough and you make it easy and you let people just show up and foster, you find that flips around regardless of your community. So that is a good idea to just, like, one of the takeaways for you is go watch what's happening. You may not know how many barriers your staff are putting in place for people unless you're watching it. And again, with so much turnover the last few years, we're seeing kind of the worst examples of that pretty commonly.
And just to piggyback on that, one of the places that you can look that you would find things that would probably surprise you unless you take a critical eye to it is your signage. And we work with a wonderful person who worked in the world of retail for years and years, and now has brought her talents to the shelter world. And she, every time she walks through a shelter, she's like, mortified by the messaging that we're putting out there just through signage that reflects lack of trust, that reflects a little bit of our frustrations, and just signage is a big deal.
And a lot of times they don't even realize, like, I'll say, wait a minute, that says stop, don't enter. And they're like, oh no, that was from like 3 years ago, right? So so it's really good to go in with a fresh eye. And we also need to know the difference between marketing and counseling. Like, we don't put me on a dating website and put she gets really crabby when she doesn't eat, right? Or you don't put your negative traits forward, you put your best traits forward. And then when someone's interested, then you can share all your other oddities. But with these animals, remember, like, if we don't think they're good enough to be adopted, we shouldn't have them on our adoption floor. But if we are adopting them, then we need to really get them into a home. That's the goal.
Let's talk about I want to, hi Stephen, good to see you. And Stephen asked specifically about big dogs, and I'm seeing some success in this area in shelters right now who are doing some specific things. So I'm excited to talk about that, but big dogs are a real challenge for shelters right now. And I'm wondering if I see someone shared the Big Dog Masterclass, which is something we did actually with Million Cat Challenge. Do any of you have thoughts on kind of what you're recommending when it comes to big dogs? And then I'll share mine.
I'll tell you a couple of things right off the top, because I was just in a large shelter that took in 20, 30,000 animals. When people bring dogs to you, are we doing everything possible to have them hold on to them, to help if they were stray, to help reunite them with their owners? Are we posting them online? A lot of places we're going, they still aren't even posting them online. So if I lost my dog, I don't know it's in the shelter unless I take time off of work to come down there. If they do come into the shelter, are we marketing them on day one? If we know that our return to owner rate is 10% and 90% of the time we have to find them a new home, are we making them available on day one? Are we trying to advocate for fosters? So many shelters are still only sending pets out to foster if they're sick and injured or if they're underage, right? So then your big old dogs are just sitting there like, I'm a good boy sitting in this kennel and no one knows I'm even here. I also think generating excitement, getting people to want to come in and adopt is really important. Doing fee waived adoptions. We hear so many times, well, if they can't afford $50, why should they have a pet? It's not about affording it. Like, I can go outside and pick up an animal for free. It's about generating excitement. And it's about this animal is costing me money while I'm in my shelter. So do I want it to cost me $100? Do I want it to cost me $800? Right? So we want to move them out quickly. There's so many more. I will zip it and let somebody else talk.
Well, I mean, ditto what Cameron said, but my pain point is the um we see so many shelters who have great play yards and are not doing play groups in the name of we don't have the staff or we don't have the volunteers. And I'm horrified to say 20 years ago, I just would go into shelters and everybody's reactive and barking and lunging. And I'm like, well, they're in the shelter. That's normal. And so now to go in shelters where dogs are sleeping and snoring or chewing on their bone or just sitting waiting for, I'm like, what happened? Did you, like, I literally asked if they drugged and that's not a joke. I literally said, did you drug the dogs? Because some shelters, have tried behavior drugs. No, they had play groups. And I think that again, if we're going to take a pet into a shelter, cat or dog, it better be summer camp while they're with us.
Yeah.
And we have to figure it out. And volunteers are the way. You're never going to have enough staff. You're never going to have a big enough building, but you have an endless supply of volunteers if you play your cards right.
Yeah, Jackson wants to start Cats Playing for Life as well.
Yeah.
So I think he's gonna have to talk to Amy about that. But I think it's the same for cats, right? Like getting them that kind of interaction is like that's
I the thing that's missing in every shelter I go to is basic interactive toys. It's uh, you know it's so important for cats to play. It's in terms of their well-being, in terms of keeping them, it, you know, physically from winding up in ISO for however long because their stress is making them sick. We know that play and it markets the heck out of them. Watching a cat play reminds you what a cat is and what you didn't know a cat was and it takes them out of that realm of being furniture in a lot of people's eyes and also puts them on an equal playing field as dogs in terms of interactivity with humans. There's so much that it does, but it comes in last in terms of what I see in the shelters. Yeah,
but you
I
talked
think
about getting them out of cages. Like I
yeah,
when you said that, I was like, oh, yeah,
yeah.
do that.
We actually, Kate Benjamin and I came up with a way because we always hear, well, we don't have the room for it, and we came up with a game plan which I can share outside of this, but that is a chart that we can take a closet and for $100 turn it into an activity room. Where at least a cat can get out, we can get them moving around, we can get them hunting a little bit with a stick and a feather, and we can make that happen if it was a priority. And I think the more time a cat spends in a cage, the more they suffer. That psychologically they go downhill. And let's just face facts: they're not the squeaky wheels, and they disappear into their kennels as opposed to when they start to go downhill, they hide it from us. So it is something that I'd love to see be boosted up in the priority list.
Yeah, so I think when we talk about the animals that stick around in shelters, and I think big dogs are one of them, and that's an example of enrichment that pays off because it's getting them adopted. Like play groups are like high impact. And Jackson, it looks like from the chat you're going to have to start Cats Playing for Life, so everybody's really into that idea. But same thing,
Yeah.
like getting animals to interact with each other is a high impact way to enrich them so they become more adoptable, not so they can live in the shelter forever and ever and ever. So I wanted to share a couple of things with big dogs. So they think there's some things that are working really well. One is to have a process to push dogs through the system, and actually deadline them when you're at capacity, and moving them. I think Lifeline does an amazing job of this. I just looked, they did a at-risk dog plea for like 45 dogs, and they virtually all got out the next day. And actually looking, kind of breaking up the problem. We are doing these pleas for quote big dogs, but that's not what people search for. They search for dogs that have cute ears. They search for old cats. They search for bonded pairs. They search for that fearful, shy animal. And so, like, breaking up the problem. And I just wrote a blog about this called chunking out the challenge, and making big dogs and adult cats as well, making them into groups that will pull at people's heartstrings, and thinking about the problem a little bit differently. I think when we're just begging for help in general without being very specific, the public becomes overwhelmed, and they don't really know entirely what to do. So I think that's really working. But also, we shared the at-risk dog process. I shared that, and it's also on my website. But having a process for moving them through, so that it is not acceptable that they're there more than 30 days. It's not acceptable. And that means rounds. It means weekly meetings with your team to talk about moving animals and how you do that. And it means communicating openly and honestly with your volunteers. Like, I think that people get worried about this because they're afraid about the reaction, but that's because we're not communicating very well. When we sit down and we talk to volunteers, we talk to advocates about why, they get it. Like, except for that 2% that's probably never going to get it. They get it. And so it really is turning it into a conversation about your animal shelter community and how animals can't live there. Like, we have to stop normalizing animals living in shelters for more than a month. Like, that has to stop being okay, because they're not built for that. Those are long-term sanctuaries. So I don't know, Sarah, you're nodding. You agree?
I totally agree. And what we see, and I know a lot of you on this call are facing this because we used to design shelters. In the back was the major space, and then the adoption area is smaller. And so we do, like Cameron said, need to be creative about our pathways to make sure, like, to me, my shelter, man, you knew, like, you bet every cage in adoption better be full. And then I figured out how to really have 90% of this shelter viewable, because we're solving for the wrong problem when we're holding that dog in the back because he's going too crazy. Well, he's going too crazy because he needs to get out of the shelter. And we all know how people choose animals. He looked at me, number one. And number two, he looks like my pet when I was 5. Like, so that
Totally.
we can't rely on any other way than exposing them. So that in the back thing is still a big issue. And to be fair, it's the way we used to design shelters.
Right, in the back, locks on kennels, all this stuff that
Yeah.
keeps people from connecting, like shelters that still aren't letting people walk through. All of this is like this. We prevent people from connecting to them, and it's like being seen is being saved, because when
Yeah.
someone sees you and they care about your life, they're invested in saving you. So I think I want to, we're about to wrap up, and I want to just ask you all, do any of you have sort of some, this really is about takeaways that people can do right now. Do you have a takeaway to share that you wish every shelter you work with would just go do this thing?
Cameron?
I say be brave. Be brave, because change is hard, but you guys, what we're doing may not be working, right? So try something. If you've seen another shelter is doing it and it's working for them, copy it. That's the best form of flattery, right? Do things as long as it's ethical and legal and you're not going to get in trouble for it. A lot of our self-imposed barriers are just that. It's not a law, it's not a rule, it's our own fear. So try it, track it, and you'll see your success. And remember, if 1 or 2 things out of 100 don't work out, that's still 98% success rate.
And I
Jack,
feel like we're here to give you confidence and permission. I can't tell you how many times we've talked about community CAP programs with decision makers. They were like, thank God we could do that. Really? We could do that? I'm like, yeah, we could do that. And I still see great potential in, so many cats shouldn't even be going into the shelter at all. And I feel like exhausting that safety net, and like we talked about foster finder, it'll change your life because now you have some breathing room whether it's to do play groups or, the proper enrichment for everyone, for cats and dogs, the proper way to concierge people through adoptions and welcome them and get them out quickly. So to me, I feel like that is still the number one goal, because I have to ask myself, do I want to try to save 600 today? Or do I want to have 100 in my shelter, right? So the answer is obvious, but focus, make sure your goals are in line with your messaging and how you're operating.
Jackson?
Yeah, I got to echo what everyone is saying, and I think we have been saying this to one degree or another. I think the one thing I would love is that you look around, you see anything that's innovative. If the first reaction is why you can't do it, then look at that. I think this is a moment where any innovation in animal welfare is something that has ripples that are really palpable. And I think the one of the biggest things that stands in our way is us. And it's okay to look at that at this point. And it's exciting. And there's a lot of exciting stuff that's available right now. And the other thing I would say is foster, foster, foster. I'd love to see cats stop coming into the shelter, just beef up your foster.
Yes. And you are
Okay.
not alone.
And
That's
my two would be start every day by looking at your daily inventory. Every day you should be getting, everybody in the organization should get an email in their inbox with your daily inventory of what's in your shelter. That's number one. And number two is start having weekly meetings about moving animals with multiple teams. We didn't get to talk about this too much, but Dr. Pizano was talking about the silo issue. It is a huge problem, especially with all these new staff. Get everyone in the room together at least once a week who can get animals moving. And that includes your comms people, your foster people, your animal care people, and really make plans to get animals going. And shelters that are doing that are seeing a lot more success when they can get past that siloing issue.
for sure.
And
You guys, I'm
one
sorry,
more
I have to duck out really fast because the vet's waiting for us. Thank you for having me here, Kristen.
Bye,
Good to see
Jackson.
you guys.
We are
One
about
other
to.
thing I was just going to say, because I saw this in the comments, you don't have to have all the resources and all the answers when you try to start something. So for anybody wanting to start a safety net program and you think you need to have $20,000 or so many supplies, you don't. You can just, as one person, ask somebody, what can I do to help you? What do you need? Maybe it's something you do have available to you that's already in your shelter system. Maybe it's something that a neighboring organization can help you with, right? So just start asking, and we've seen a lot of success with that. So don't feel like, oh, well, I need X amount of money or I need so many supplies. You don't. You just need to just jump in and then figure it out.
Yeah, just do something. I think just do something to stop saying this is an impossible problem. Do something to try to fix it, and it is going to have an impact. So we're really grateful you all came today, and I hope we'll continue these conversations in the future. We are all here. We have Sarah, do you want to give your business name and website?
A plug, sure. So my company is teamshelterusa.com is the website. There's a contact button on there if you're interested in a consult. Team Shelter USA is an LLC. And Cameron and I are also part of Maddie's Million Pet Challenge, and we have funding for Maddie's. So we do select certain shelters a year to do pro bono consults. And our website is Maddie'sMillionPetChallenge.org. And if you click down to shelter consultations, you can send in an application.
Thank you so much. Yep. And our business is outcomesforpets.com. And we work, a lot of times we'll work with the same shelter over multiple years. So it's really awesome to get to see how much alignment there is. And I think there's so many other people that could have been here today as well. Like there are people that have been in this field a long time that have expertise that want to help you. I think the reason we all work together is that we really want to solve this system problem. It is a big one, but it's all solvable. Like we can fix some of this. So thank you all for your time. As always, we try to have these webinars every month or so. So follow Outcomes for Pets and subscribe to our newsletter to follow all the latest. And yeah, we hope you're all hanging in there in this really tough time in summer, and appreciate so much you coming. We'll send out the chat, some notes, some links, and the recording as soon as we're able to get to that. And thank you so much, Dr. Pizano and Cameron, for being here.
Thank you, Kristen. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.